do when we simplify radicals is we don't want any factors in there that are perfect squares. Because what we can do is factor those out and then simplify those and pull this perfect square out, okay? So when I look at factors of 24, what is the largest factor in 24 that's a perfect square? Well, 16 is not a factor of 24, neither is 9, but 4 is. So I look at this and I factor it by saying 4 times 6. And then I can pull it apart, right? That's what I just showed you. Square root of 4 is 2. So I have 2 times the square root of 6. So if I put in the square root of 24 into my calculator, I'll get the same answer as if I put 2 times the square root of 6 into the calculator. All right, so negative square root of 48. All right, so sometimes we get, maybe some of you know off the top of your head what the biggest square root is, or the biggest perfect square factor of 48 is, but some of you may not. So when I get numbers that I'm not sure of, what is the biggest factor a number can have besides itself? It's half of itself, right, if it's even. It's half, right? So 48 divided by 2 is 24. 24 is the biggest factor that goes into 48. It's the biggest number that goes into 48. So I can take that number and I can go over here and go, okay, well, 25 doesn't go into it. So I'm going to try 16. I'm going to say 48 divided by 16. And there it is. It goes in 3 times. So I've got a negative out here. That's going to stay. 16 times 3. Now, I don't always chop it up like this. That's just a step I don't do. Okay, but you can think of it that way. Square root of 16 is 4, and then I have the square root of 3. Okay, coming over here, biggest perfect square that goes into 162. If you actually divide that by 2, you get 81. So this is the square root of 81 times 2 g to the 6th. Well, how do we know if g to the 6th is a perfect square? Well, let's go back to when you guys probably learned how to do this. We've got the square root of g to the 6th. Well, that's g times g times g times g times g times g. There's 6 of them, right? Now remember, with the square root, for every 2 that are in there, I think, didn't you guys learn like 2 are in jail and you gotta have 2 work together to get 1 out? Okay, for every 2 that are in there, 1 comes out. Right? 2 in, 1 comes out. 2 in, 1 comes out. Okay? So this is a perfect square because there's an there's an even number and 3 come out. Okay, so I'm gonna leave that the way it is because it is a perfect square. Now let me tell you a little secret here. So a square root, we don't put the 2 there, the 2 is invisible, but there's really a 2 there. If you can divide the number by 2, if it's even, then it's a perfect square. And your answer is if you take that number and divide it by this number. Okay? So 6 divided by 2 is going to give me my exponent on the outside. So 81, perfect square becomes 9. G to the 6th is the perfect square. It's g to the 6 divided by 2, which is 3, and then square root of 2. Okay, 512, that actually has a perfect square when we divide it by 2 also, but I couldn't fit it on here. It's 256, and that is 16 I do have a problem though. H to the 7th. H to the 7th is not a perfect square. But there is a perfect square that goes into H to the 7th. Remember, I can take H to the 7th and I can cut it up any way I want. I could do H squared times H to the 5th. I could do H to the 3rd times H to the 4th. Okay? Factors of H to the 7th, each H is a factor of H to the 7th because they're all being multiplied. Okay? So, the greatest factor of H to the 7th that is a perfect square is H to the 6th. And then we still have the H that's left. Okay, so we pull out 256, that's 16, we still have that negative. We pull out H to the 6th, that becomes H to the 3rd. And what's left is 2 and H. Okay, so with that H to the 7th, here's a question. If I had x to the 101st power, what is the closest perfect square to this, based on what we just did? Remember, this is 101 x's being multiplied by each other. They're all factors. It's x to 100 times x. This is a perfect square because it's divisible by 2. And you divide it by 2, this comes out, this would be x to the 50 times the square root of x. Okay, so I have some for you to try. And we will need to go over these in the next video.